Ask questions about project risk management. Housekeeping. Use the chat for questions, comments, and to participate in activities. This meeting is being recorded. The recording will be posted on PMI HVC's YouTube channel. And please ensure you are on mute. My name is Jasmine T. Clark, and I am the VP of Professional Development. So our agenda, we have a welcome, some announcements. We have our guest speaker, Harry Hall, PMP, PMI, RMP, ARM, -E. And I'm pretty sure Harry will tell us what all those letters mean. And then we'll have closing remarks. Announcements. Volunteers needed. Can you spare 3 to 5 hours per month? Be the change you want to see. And what is your talent? What can you contribute to PMI Hudson Valley? And earn PDUs just for volunteering. So if you want more information, please reach out. And you'll have some contact information at the end of the meeting. We have our Spring Professional Development Day coming up with Ruth Pierce. It takes place on Friday, July 19th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern. It will be an interactive virtual workshop. There will be giveaways. Register today. Early bird pricing ends soon. Transformation with intention. June is National Caribbean American Heritage Month, LGBTQIA2S plus Pride Month, National Dairy Month, and National Adopt a Cat Month. Welcome to our new members, Christopher, Irene, Jim, John, Caitlin, Mohammed, Nicholas, Naverta, and Tanya. Welcome to the Hudson Valley chapter. And we also have some congratulations because we have some new PMPs. Ashley and Quinn, congratulations. And also a big congratulations for 5 years of membership. Congratulations, Kevin, you reached a milestone. Next up, we have Harry Hall. Harry Hall is a speaker, teacher, author, and blogger. His expertise includes risk management in enterprises, portfolios, programs, and projects. Harry is the creator of the PMI RMP exam prep course and the Project Risk Hub community. He has worked for the University of Georgia, Georgia Farm Bureau Mutual Insurance Company, Icon Financial Services, and General Electric. Harry left the corporate world in 2016 to start his consulting business, the Project Risk Coach, where he teaches, project management and project risk management to project managers worldwide. Harry graduated from the University of Georgia and is a certified project management professional and a project risk management professional. So now I welcome Harry. So just give me 1 second to stop sharing.
Okay, Jasmine, thank you so much for the introduction. Is everything coming across clearly there?
Yes, it is. You're all set to go.
Okay, so we were talking a little bit before we started, a little bit about my career. Way back, I started working in information technology, and over time, as I was working on improving the software development lifecycle for an insurance company, I was reading more and more about this thing called project management. And it was the first time I began to indoctrinate myself in project management. And the more I read about project management, the more I felt like if I was ever created to do anything, it was certainly to manage projects. So back around 2000, I left the IT department of an insurance company, went to work for Icon Office Solutions as a project manager. So I went from a position where I had 50 people reporting to me to a place where I was a project manager with teams reporting to me. And so initially I was managing small projects and then larger projects. And then later in my career began to implement project management offices. all along the way, I could see that there were certain things that were not occurring quite the way that I wanted them to. We weren't getting the outcomes I was really desiring to have. And I began to dig a little deeper in terms of risk management. And so over time, this is what started specializing more and more in, eventually became the director of enterprise risk management for a large insurance company here in the state of Georgia. So just a little bit of my background, I shared that just to say, for project managers such as yourself, if you're interested in risk management, there are all kinds of opportunities in this day and age, lots of different jobs that are related to risk management. So today, I want to share with you this presentation, 7 frequently asked questions about project risk management. And I'd love to start with this question, and if you're where you can type in the chat there. When you think of your personal project risk management, how well things are going there, where are you at on this scale? And you can type 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. How do you feel about the risk management that you're doing today? So if you would share there in the chat, and I'll give you just a moment to respond. Okay. I see Jasmine says she's satisfied, so she's doing fairly well, but maybe there are a few things, hopefully tonight, that you'll pick up that'll take you another level. I also wonder, and you can share this in the chat as well, if you had to describe your risk management practices today with one word, what might that word be? I mean, it may be non-existent, okay, but if you had to describe your risk management today with one word, what would that word be? Give you just a moment there to reply. I say scary, and this guy's fitting to the scary description, right? The Standish Group for years has has been doing surveys with companies in lots of different industries, and what they are looking at is how successful are these companies in terms of their projects. And I've watched this for a number of years, and what I typically see is in most years is about 1 out of 3 projects are successful. Now, what do they mean by successful? It means the project's coming in on schedule, it's coming in at or below budget, and it's coming in scope, okay? That we're actually delivering the things that were promised in the project. So I don't know about you, but I'd like to do better than that. I like, when I'm managing projects and programs, I want my success rate to be better than that. So I wonder, as just a point of reflection right now, as you're thinking about your own practices, are you reaching your potential? Is your company reaching its potential? A few years back, I had a president of a company call me and asked me to come in and visit with him. And I remember going in and sitting in his office, and he began to describe the past few years and telling me, using some language that that I don't use, but he was not a happy camper, that the information technology department was not delivering projects on schedule. And many times they were ending up costing way more than they had estimated. He said he hired the McKinsey Group to come in and do some analysis. The McKinsey group looked at 120 projects, and they said 20 of these projects were successful. So that is a 16% success rate. So 1 out of 3 is pretty bad, but 16%, that was worse. And so this president asked me to come into that company and help them to work on their project management and risk management. And I had the privilege of doing that. You know, Deloitte says this: if you treat risk management as a part-time job, you might soon find yourself looking for one. Okay. And that is true whether you're a project manager or program manager or you just work in risk management. We have to treat risk management in a way that it is the key. It is key to having success in our projects and in our career. So here are the 7 questions that I'd like to address with you this evening. The first one being, what are the benefits? What are the benefits of project risk management? Secondly, how can I engage project stakeholders? Third question, how can I develop a risk management plan? Fourth, how can I identify risk? Fifth, how do we go about evaluating risk? Sixth question, how can I respond to risk? And the final question we'll address this evening is, how can I monitor risk? So before we dive into those questions, let me take just a moment to review with you what is risk, okay? If we look at the Project Management Body of Knowledge, 7th edition, the definition is an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on one or more project objectives. So what do we see in this definition? Well, first of all, we see we're talking about uncertainty. You think about risk, we're thinking about events or conditions in the future, okay? If they occur, okay? If these events and conditions occur, then a couple of things can happen. One, some good things may happen, i.e., these are opportunities in our projects, or some bad things may happen, the negative effects on our project objectives. So let's dive in with this first question. What are the benefits of project risk management? And there are many. By the way, as I'm sharing and presenting here, I want you to feel free in the chat to drop any comments that you may have or ask any questions. And periodically we'll stop and Jasmine can help me make sure that we're addressing all of your questions. So here's some benefits. First benefit that I would highlight is fewer delays. Okay, if we do the right things in terms of identifying our risk, evaluating the risk, responding to the risk, that is taking a proactive approach to our projects, we're more likely to be able to stay on schedule. Second benefit that I would highlight, save time and money. Take a look here in the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. You can find this on page 90 if you want to look at that at some point in time, but it's a cost of change curve. I'll give you in just a moment to kind of digest this a bit, but we see that, and I don't know how many of you, I was talking with Jasmine and Ravnat before we started, and I understand up in your territory there's quite a bit of software development, that heavy IBM presence, that kind of thing. A lot of my career as a project manager has been in software development. And when you look at this cost of change curve, what we find is, let's say we're working on requirements and we're doing our business analysis and we're defining requirements. If we find a defect in the requirements at that point in time, let's say that it cost us $1 to correct that defect. If we were to not find that and we were to let that go on, and maybe a little bit later in the later part of the design work, we find that same defect, it would cost us $5 to fix that defect, $20 as we're actually building, coding, $50 at the point that we're doing our testing, and get this, I'm sure this never happens to any of you. You go to production and you have a defect, it costs us, relatively speaking, 150x. Where do we want to find this defect? We certainly want to find it at the point of origination. We want to find that as soon as possible. And this helps to illustrate in very powerful ways what risk management can do for us. If we can identify the risks early in our projects, and of course over time continue to identify risks that surface, the sooner we can identify that and determine if it's a significant risk that we need to respond to that risk, we're going to be able to save time and we're going to be able to save money. Another benefit is really better collaboration as we lead risk management exercises, identifying risk. You know, we have these team members, and each of them have their own project experience, their own industry experience, their own certifications. And so we're collaborating together. We're identifying these risks together. We're working on how should we respond to these risks together. There's better communication, better collaboration. I love this one, less rework. I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of having to come back and do things a second, third, and fourth times trying to get things right. I'd rather hit the target right up front, okay? Less rework. So PMI, the Project Management Institute, and the Pulse of the Profession had this to say: for organizations that apply a formal risk management approach, get this, 73% of the projects meet their objectives. 73%. 61% finish on time. And 64% of those projects are completed within the approved budget. Those are some pretty strong stats there. Again, if you think back in the Standish Group, 1 out of 3 projects being successful, these are some much improved numbers. And here's the thing. In many of your organizations, many of your companies, maybe you're in some kind of competition with other providers. Think about this. If your competition has a 60% success rate and you have a 30% success rate, guess who is going to win the race? It's not hard to figure that out, okay? So risk management is all about helping us to achieve our objectives and to be successful with our projects. All right, so let's move on to the second question of the 7. Here it is: how can I engage stakeholders in project risk management? So let me pause here and ask, would love to see your responses in the chat there. Tell me, in your own companies, in your own jobs, what is one of the biggest challenges that you face in terms of just engaging with your stakeholders? We're going to talk more in a moment about what are stakeholders, but I think most of you have a pretty good idea of what that's all about. But if you don't mind, in the chat, share with me what is one of the biggest challenges you face in engaging with your stakeholders. I'll give you just a moment to respond. Okay, Kathy says the person is a meeting guest and doesn't have the team's account. We can't verify their identity. Okay, so it sounds like possibly more of a technology issue there. That is an obstacle of understanding who they are and what roles they might play in the project. Okay, anybody else? Jasmine says stakeholder not wanting to be updated about minor details, but then complain when they do not receive full comprehensive updates. I hear you, Jasmine. Okay. Yeah. So finding the proper balance in terms of what we're communicating with our stakeholders and how often can be very challenging. Revnat says schedules and time zones, sometimes not knowing who else might be impacted. Yeah, so, for several years I worked with a company in India. And so the time zone thing was always a bit tricky of finding the right time of the day of getting people together. Okay, and Revnat also says it's sometimes a little difficult to understand who else may be impacted. Engaging them with the right materials, prepare ideas to pitch. Yes. Okay, excellent. Thank you all for those responses. So let's talk about stakeholders just a little bit more. So what is a stakeholder? Well, it's any individual, group, or organization that may affect our projects or may be affected by our projects. The definition from the PMBOK, they even go on to say to perceive itself to be affected, okay? And so we have stakeholders in projects, we have them in programs, we have them in portfolios. It's important to understand that stakeholders may be internal in your company or organization, but they also may be external. Okay. We have vendors, we have suppliers, we have neighbors. If we're maybe doing construction projects that are impacting neighborhoods, those neighborhoods, the people that live there, are stakeholders. And so it's really important from a risk management perspective that we begin early in our projects to identify those stakeholders. How do we do that? Well, here's some suggestions. If there's a project charter that's been developed, take a look at the charter. Okay, if you're helping to develop the charter with your project sponsor, this is something that I would encourage that you include in the charter is a list of your key stakeholders. Look at any project documentation that you have. Maybe there was a business case that was done. Maybe there's some procurement documents that you need to review, some contracts. If there are requirements that have already been gathered, take a look at all the project-related documentation to see who are the individuals, the groups, or the organizations that may affect or be affected by this project. How about stakeholder register? So if there are similar projects from the past, if you can go and take a look at the stakeholder registers from those projects, that can be very revealing. Interviews, I'm going to talk more about in just a moment, and then any lessons learned from prior projects or earlier phases of a project. So one of my habits through the years is whenever I was assigned a project, one of the things that I would immediately begin to do is I would begin to ask, okay, who are the stakeholders? Who are the key people and groups that are going to be impacted by this project? And I would ask these key stakeholders, could I visit with you 10 to 15 minutes? Sometimes if I could, I'd have a cup of coffee with them. I love to have that face-to-face conversation. Not always possible, so sometimes some virtual meetings via Zoom or Teams or whatever was necessary. But when I would do these brief interviews, and I'm very respectful and mindful of their time. They're very busy people. But I would ask two questions. One of those being, what are your interests in this project? Why are you interested in this project? And then secondly, what are your concerns going into this project? And so I began to develop a stakeholder register, and you'll notice maybe you're familiar with, maybe you've heard of this before, the power interest grid. So part of the stakeholder register, I would have these attributes. Who is the stakeholder? What are their interests? What are their concerns? And then I would evaluate their power either as high or low, and their interest as high or low. So what might we do with this? Once we've completed this initial interviews with these stakeholders, we then want to look for the individuals who have high power and high interest. And in the upper right-hand quadrant of this power interest grid, these are the stakeholders that I want to give most of my energy and time to. These are the people, the groups, the organizations that I'm going to watch more closely, that I'm going to interact more with more closely. Now, it doesn't mean that I ignore these others, but in terms of being wise about the use of our time, and we as project managers are, normally managing multiple projects, so it's not like we have a lot of time just to throw away. So this is a great way of coming up to speed quickly early in our projects, beginning to understand what their interests and concerns are, and then understanding who is high in power, high in interest. So over time, this stakeholder register is developed more and more. And of course, this is not once and done. Okay. Over time, we revisit this stakeholder register, and we're updating the information in this register. Okay. Let's move on to our third question, and that is, how can I develop a project risk management plan? Okay, a risk management plan. We think about risk management plans, it's important to understand this is not the risk response plan. A lot of people confuse that. As we're working on the project management plan, and we're working on subsidiary plans such as a schedule management plan, a cost management plan, a communications management plan, and yes, a risk management plan. This is our approach to risk management. And so the kinds of questions that we would be answering as we develop that risk management plan, number one is, what project life cycle are we using? Predictive, hybrid, agile? Who should be involved in the risk management processes? What are the roles and responsibilities of those people? What tools and techniques might we use? So as you identify risks in your projects, and we'll look in just a bit about some different tools. If we're using brainstorming and say the Delphi technique, if that's the plan, our approach, then we would include that in the risk management plan. Another question, how often will you perform these risk management activities? So, are you meeting with your team once a week and having a weekly meeting? Maybe part of that weekly meeting, you're going to be talking about risk. The sixth question here, who will own the project risk? And I'll just go ahead and say this, that the project manager should not be the sole person owning the project risk. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So let me pause here just for a moment. Jasmine, I don't know if we've had any questions pop up, or if any of you have a question that you would like to ask about anything that I've covered up to this point in time. Feel free to drop that in the chat, and I'll give you just a moment to do that. Okay, Jasmine's question is, how do we anticipate risk when managing people? And I know her line of work, she deals a lot where you're dealing with people. I would say, my response right away is you would take the same approach. You would do a stakeholder analysis where early in the project, as you're initiating the project, that you're beginning to identify those stakeholders. You're going to begin to have some simple interviews, again, 10 or 15 minutes with those individuals to ask about what are your concerns, what are your interests, and we would start out that way. Now, as we begin to move into the planning and execution of the project, we're going to need to perform some risk identification exercises. My habit through the years has been in the kickoff meeting of the project, I would do some type of risk identification exercise with the team, with the people. Okay. And then we would periodically revisit the risk register. Okay. And we'd continue that going forward. I hope that's helpful. Wait just a moment. I see one more question coming in. Ravneet says, how can we quantify, add qualifiers like severity? When do you kick in mitigation or plan B? Excellent questions. And we're going to, if you will let me hold that for a minute, I'm actually going to cover that in a little greater detail. But in short, once we've identified the risk, we must evaluate the risk. And we're going to evaluate the risk at a minimum qualitatively and perhaps quantitatively. More on that in a moment. And for those risks that are significant, then we are going to have some kind of risk response strategy like mitigating the risk or some type of contingency plan. But we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Thank you for your questions. So let's move on. How do we identify risk? Charles Temper once said the first step in the risk management process is to acknowledge the reality of risk. Denial is a common tactic that substitutes deliberate ignorance for thoughtful planning. I can't tell you how many times I've talked with project managers through the years, and they're like, our people just don't think this way. They don't even acknowledge the possibility of risk. Okay. And this is where, using our leadership skills, our interpersonal skills, and communication and training, and helping people to understand not only what is risk, but why does that matter? Why does it matter to them? Okay. So the first step in risk management is helping people to understand the reality of risk. And we frankly have risk in every aspect of our lives, in our personal lives, as well as in our careers, in our businesses, in our projects. So I started blogging back in 2012, and I've written lots and lots of articles, and you can check those out at projectriskcoach.com. Again, that's projectriskcoach.com. The article that has gotten the most visits through the years on a regular basis is an article that I wrote entitled 7 Ways to Identify Risk. And I share in more detail each of these tools and techniques. Thank you, Jasmine. So we were talking just a moment ago about interviews. Fantastic way of starting early and identifying risk, because when you ask that question, what concerns you? What are your concerns going into the project? Listen very carefully to what that stakeholder has to say. Those concerns oftentimes give us a heads up to risk. Okay, interviews, brainstorming. I would say brainstorming is the most popular technique that I see with project managers. Why is that the case? I think because most people understand brainstorming and the process. B, it's fairly simple. It's a great tool that you can use. Checklists. I'll show you an example of checklists in just a moment. A great way of identifying risk, making sure that you don't miss certain risks. Assumption analysis. So people are making certain types of assumptions as we're going through projects. It's critical that we capture those assumptions like in an assumption log, and periodically review those and see what is the source of information related to that assumption. Cause and effect diagrams, nominal group techniques, affinity diagrams. Again, if you go out to my website and do a search, you can find in-depth articles on each of these risk identification tools and techniques. So we've talked about interviews, again, asking about concerns and interests. Brainstorming. So as we brainstorm, we can ask the question, what may help or hinder our ability to complete this project on schedule, okay? And just capture those risks. What may help or hinder our ability to complete the project on budget, and capture those risks within scope, okay? And so we're brainstorming, again, a great way to identify risk. What about checklists? So if I've got an example here under requirements, and with a checklist, it's just a list of common risks that we might see in the type of project that we're in, or in the industry that we're in. So I won't read all of these, but you see requirements fail to align with company strategy. Requirements fail to align with business processes. requirements have compliance issues. So what we would do, we had a checklist like this, and we go through each of those risks and we ask ourselves, is that relevant or applicable to the project that I'm working on? The beauty of this as you go through that list is some of these things you might not would have thought about at all were it not for the prompt that's coming out of that checklist. The danger of this is no checklist. It can possibly cover every type of risk. So I like to use checklists in combination with some other risk identification technique. So once we've identified the risk, it's important that we write what's called a risk statement, okay? A risk statement. And if you break the risk statement down, it really, the syntax is this. What is the cause of the risk? What is the risk? And if the risk actually occurs, what would be the impact? Okay? So many times as I'm doing this, I'm thinking in terms of the risk first. What is the uncertain event or condition that may happen? What may help or hinder my ability to complete some activity? And so once that risk is, once I write that down, then I begin to ask myself, well, what facts do we have? What conditions do we know to be true that might give rise to that risk? And then what is the impact or the consequences? So I give you an example here. Here's a risk statement. CDC estimates that so far this season there have been at least 25 million illnesses, 270,000 hospitalizations, and 17,000 deaths from flu. Okay, that's the causal factor. These are facts. These are things that we know to be true. And here's the risk statement. Family members may. And you'll find a lot of times when I write my risk statements, I will say may or may not. Family members may catch the flu. Okay? Hasn't happened yet. It's something in the future. It's certainly something that is uncertain. Family members may catch the flu. And here's the impact resulting in respiratory illnesses and hospitalizations. See how that works? Now, at first, I'll just tell you, when you're using this type of syntax, it takes a little practice. But I can assure you, the more you do this, you'll become more and more comfortable with this, and it will become second nature for you. Here's another one. Because key stakeholders have conflicting interpretations of scope. They understand the scope in different ways. Here's the risk. The project may take longer than expected. And here's the impact, resulting in adverse impacts to the schedule and budget. See how all that works? Give it a try sometime. Cause, risk, impact. All right, let's move on to the fifth question. Jasmine, help me. Are we doing okay with time? You can just drop a note there and let me know. So the fifth question is, how can I evaluate? And this gets back to Ravnet's question earlier. How can we evaluate risk? And let me just ask, and if you want to respond in the chat there, let me know, why do you think we evaluate risk? Why do we do this at all? And I'll go ahead and tell you for sake of time here. So the real primary reason that we evaluate these risks is all about prioritization. If you have a risk register, and let's say you have 70 risks in the risk register, How do we know which of these risks really matter? And that's 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 why we do this. Yeah. Kathy says prevent the problem from happening again in the future. Absolutely. So if we have very significant risks and we've had this kind of thing happen in the past, we want to do something about it now. So we can evaluate risk in a couple of different ways. One is qualitatively and the other is quantitatively. Let me give you the cliff notes here. Okay. Um, Kathy says, once you identify that problem, this will prevent unnecessary expenses. Yes, so that's exactly what we're after. If we can identify these risks early and address them quickly, it's going to save us time and save us money. Okay. So qualitatively, what I like to say to project managers is we should always be performing qualitative risk analysis. Why do I say that? Well, it's quick and easy. I'm going to show you what it looks like in just a moment. But you have to keep in mind this is subjective. Should always be performed and it's used to evaluate individual risks. Now, quantitatively, sometimes we may need to perform quantitative risk analysis. Let's keep in mind this will require more time. It is objective. Here's the part of the reason we may choose to do quantitative is, let's say that the project sponsor wants to know more details of what something's going to cost. Okay, so it is objective, it is optional. It's used to evaluate overall project risk. It provides more detailed information for particularly those big decisions like at the end of this phase, are we going to continue with this program, with this project? And it's used to develop contingency reserves. Okay, so let's take a look at qualitative risk analysis here for a moment. So we have these different risks, and let's say on a scale of 1 to 5 that we look at risk E, and we ask the expert in the room, somebody on the team there that has a lot of knowledge in this area, what is the probability that this might occur on a scale of 1 to 5? And they say very high. So we have a 5 there. And then the impacts of 5, we multiply probability times impact and we get a risk score. Then we can compare one risk to another and we see that certain risks are high. Okay. Matter of fact, let me move on over here. If we were looking at this risk register, we might have a threshold that says all the risks that have a risk score of 20 or higher, we're going to say that those are urgent and they require a risk owner. So what we would do is assign these two risks to someone on the team or some key stakeholder that has the knowledge and experience to be able to develop a risk response plan. Okay, so let's move on. How do we respond? How can I respond to risk? Tom Gibb had this to say: if you do not actively attack the risk, they will actively attack you. Isn't that the truth? So once we identify risk, we either have threats or we have an opportunity. Okay, threats and opportunities. Remember that definition of the risk early: an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, may have a positive or negative effect on the project objective. If it's positive, that's an opportunity. If it's negative, that's a threat. And so I won't go into the details of each of these risk response strategies, but if you want to improve your risk management, it's going to become important that you understand more: what do we mean to avoid a threat? What does it mean to transfer a threat? What does it mean to enhance an opportunity or to accept an opportunity? So these are all different possible strategies that we can use. So then we want to work with the risk owner to develop a risk response plan. In some cases, we'll have a contingency plan. So if you're a project manager that works, let's say, for outdoor events, and you know you have the risk of rain, right? So if it rains, then what are you going to do? We do this a lot, but this is an example of contingency plans. If X happens, then Y, then we're going to do Y. What is that? And so thinking ahead, being proactive, developing these risk response plans so that if the risk begins to happen or it hits some trigger, then we're going to execute those response plans. In some cases, for the most big time significant risks, we may also have a fallback plan so that if the contingency plan fails, that the fallback plan is we have that ready to fall back on. Okay, let's move to our final question. How can I monitor risk? And when we monitor risk, we're doing the following. We are reevaluating the risks that have already been identified. We're also identifying new risks, and we're determining the effectiveness of our risk management processes. That is, how well are the risk identification techniques that I'm using working? How well is the qualitative risk analysis working? So we review those previously identified risks. So you might have, say, 30 risks in your risk register. You want to go through those risks periodically and review them because those risks are likely changing, or I'll put it this way, they should be changing. Okay, if we're doing our job, we're reducing the threats and we're increasing the opportunities. We also, with our team members, we want to identify any new risks. Again, evaluate the risk processes. How well is everything going with the risk management? And there we have it. 7 frequently asked questions about project risk management. If I may, and I'll turn it over to Jasmine here just in a moment, if you have interest in going a little deeper and learning more about risk management, or maybe this has piqued your interest in terms of the risk management professional certification. I have an online course that you can find at projectriskcoach.com/RMP. Again, that's projectriskcoach.com/RMP. If you go through that, you earn 20 educational hours. And whether you want to get the certification or not, I can assure you, you will learn a lot of stuff that you can apply in very practical ways in your real world projects and programs. Jasmine, that's what I had for this evening. Appreciate y'all's patience and hanging around and participating the way you have in the chat.
Thank you so much, Harry. That was great. So many gems, so many, so many. Did you have a
Thank you.
comment, Kathy? Oh, Ravinit had a question. How do you think Gen Gen AI will impact risk management field?
Do we have an hour at this point? It is, I would just say that we're very early into the whole AI thing. I think there's a lot more to come, but personally, I'm already using ChatGPT, and I think there's a lot of value. I don't think it is a replacement for experienced project managers who have managed risk in their industries. And it doesn't replace the interpersonal aspects of our project management and risk management, but great question. I think a lot more to come in the years ahead.
Do we have any other questions for Harry? Kathy, I see you came off mute. Did you have a question? Did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So thank you so much, Harry. That was a very informative presentation about risk management.
I
I'm not an
appreciate that.
expert, but I definitely think that I'm still satisfied, but I'm higher on the satisfied
Yeah,
scale
good.
because I still
So
have a lot to
again,
learn.
for those of you that just want to explore and learn a little bit more, you can go out to my website at projectriskcoach.com. I also have a YouTube channel with over 300 free videos out there, so go and take advantage of those free resources.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Harry. So we're almost done our meeting. I just wanted to give us some key information. So our next meetings, we actually have July and August already set up. So the Hudson Valley chapter will feature Tanya Boyd and her presentation, Tales from the Swamp, Navigating the Murky Waters of Project Management. That will take place on Wednesday, July 10th. 2024 from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we also have Neil Witten, Dealing with Difficult People. That will take place on Wednesday, August 15th from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Please notice the change in time. And thank you again for attending tonight's meeting. Have you thought about how you can make an impact with HVC? If you're interested in volunteering with the Hudson Valley chapter, please contact our interim volunteer coordinator at member@large@pmihvc.org and follow us on social media. That's our YouTube channel. So youtube.com/@PMI-Hudson Valley chapter. So tonight's PDUs will be submitted automatically for folks. Please give us 5 to 7 business days for processing. And again, thank you again. My name is Jasmine T. Clark. I am the VP of Professional Development. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Okay.